All right, there's a big show happening at Samuel Slaters Hall in Webster. It's part of Indian Ranch this Saturday. 3 more funny ladies of comedy. Carrie Louise will be there, Maya Mannion, and Emily Ruskowski, who joins us.
Hi.
How you doing? Thank you very much for checking in with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I was watching some of your stuff online. You mentioned that you were a social worker. Are you still doing the social worker thing?
I am.
So I heard you mention some stuff about that. That's not like some kind of HIPAA violation, is it? I mean, it's not a medical thing, but I mean, are you allowed to? Because I would imagine being a social worker, there's just a treasure trove of material there on what you deal with.
Oh, there sure is.
Yeah, and so they don't mind. I guess if you don't use names, they don't mind you using that as part of your comedy.
Yeah, you'd be surprised that the HIPAA law itself does not have a comedy clause in it, which feels unfair.
Wow, yeah.
It was a real oversight, I think, and when they wrote the law. So, yeah, I have to be careful. It's a great question. Yeah, I always... You change names, but I'll also change, identifying information where I can.
Right.
So I'll change the age, but I'll say someone, when I lived in D.C., there was a client I saw, so I'll change as much identifying information I can while preserving what's funny about the interaction.
What do you think is the funniest thing you've brought up from your other job?
I mean, I always think it's like things people have really said and really happened. There's so much that I'm like, oh, I couldn't write anything better than this.
Right.
That, people have said, teenagers love to say the most ridiculous, insane things to adults that they can get away with. And I'm always just like, ooh, file that away.
Yeah, right. That's right. You have a little separate file for stand-up, I guess.
Yeah, I've got my notebook for my assessment, and then I've got the joke notebook, and I make sure I write the appropriate things in each.
Right. What color is that highlighter? Is that the pink highlighter or the orange one?
That's the orange one, not to be confused. Blue is for social work. Orange is for don't put this in someone's assessment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, this is a time where everybody is trying to do their resolutions, whether it's losing weight or I'm going to start a new thing. And this is how you kind of got into comedy, right? It was a New Year's resolution?
Yeah, it sure was, 2009.
And that wasn't here in Boston, though. That was actually was that in D.C., where you used to live?
It was. Yep, it was in D.C. I was down in D.C. for grad school. I'd done an internship. My undergrad degree is in political science.
Okay.
And I went to D.C. and I was like, make me a congresswoman. And they were like, no, that's not how that works. You're a secretary. And I was like, oh, I'm bad at this. Uh-oh, I got to find something else to do. And so I went down there. I did grad school down there. And my friends were like, you're funny and should try stand-up. And I had always watched, I'd come home and watch Premium Blend, and Comedy Central was always on in my house, what I, always watched. And I didn't know how you could do it. I didn't know there was, a pathway to being able to get on stage. I don't know if, people were just plucked off the street. I didn't know there was, you go to open mics and you put your name out that way. And my friends somehow did. My friends who were lawyers and other social workers were like, oh, there's open mics. And I was like, how did I not know this was a thing? And so I was lucky that they knew it was a thing, and so steered me in the right direction.
And how was that first experience? I mean, did you kill it right away, or what happened there?
I mean, I delayed it as much as possible. I made the resolution at midnight on January 1st of 2009, and my first date doing stand-up, I think it was December 9th of that year.
Oh, right, so right on that.
Yeah, I was very quick with it. So I kind of panicked and then researched like crazy because this is going to sound weird coming from a comic. I try to avoid embarrassing myself at all costs.
Oh. Maybe.
It sounds like stand-up's not a great venue for that,
Yeah, or being in Congress doesn't seem to help that out either. Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah. You want to avoid embarrassment. These are not the fields.
Right, exactly.
So I was a little misguided, I guess, in that quest. But I wrote and I watched as much stand-up as I could, and I just wrote and kept aggravating my poor friends, and I would just call them and, like, ramble sets at them. Like, I'd ramble a joke set and be like, blah, 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 here's my 5-minute set. And they were like, terrific. Like, they were so patient with me. Like, can you just sit on the phone with me while I spew these unfinished jokes at you? Thank you. And I did that for months, and I think they were like, you got to do these in front of an audience. I can't do any more of these phone calls.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a different energy, and I'm sure an actual audience isn't as forgiving as your friends are.
I mean, my friends were exceedingly patient with me.
Yes.
I wrote and wrote and wrote for months and months before I got up and tried it, and they came out to the show. They were so nice. But I also didn't know. When I first started, I thought you wrote jokes, you tell them once, and then that's it. So I was going to this Thursday night mic in a mall. It was next to a movie theater in a shopping mall.
Oh, nice.
And very glamorous.
Yeah.
And I was writing an entirely new set every week, and one of the comics came up to me and was like, what happened to the jokes from, you told a joke before that was good, why don't you tell it anymore? And I was like, oh, I already told it. And he was like, oh, that's not how comedy works. I had no idea.
Oh. But still, at the same time, wasn't like that comic kind of amazed? Like, oh my God, you're writing fresh jokes every week? I mean, they weren't great jokes.
But they weren't stellar top shelf. So maybe he was like, we don't want to hear these terrible jokes every week. Maybe build on one and make it better.
Yeah. Well, that's a common thing. Like a comic will write a joke, do it live, but then over a period of time, it'll kind of evolve, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
That's one of the most fun things about jokes. Sometimes I'll have a joke from like 6 months or a year ago, and then like a new thing will happen, and I go, oh my God, I can weave this into that other joke. It's so fun when you find the puzzle pieces that change and shape a story or a joke.
I think that is cool. You get to kind of like, if you follow a comic for long enough, you can see or hear the evolution. You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of like a fine wine, or it's kind of like cheese that's been in the fridge too long. I guess it depends what the joke is, but
yes, it can definitely go either way.
Yeah. So now, how long have you been doing comedy since that time? So you said 2009?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you keep doing it? Were you going out during this past couple of years during the pandemic? Like, how were you doing it? Because I know a lot of comics were doing the Zoom thing, or they were doing the drive-in thing, or how did you continue to perform through that? Yeah,
so I did that same thing. I did Zoom. That was quite an adjustment for all of us. But I think everything stopped so abruptly, that we're just like, I guess we're Zooming now. And then I did some shows outside, which is great in the summer and rough in December.
Yes. Oh, man.
It is. That's the show where any show, whenever you take the first spot on a lineup, which we call the bullet spot, which sounds super fun. Everyone loves to take a bullet, right? Normally people are like, oh, the first spot. But in those winter shows, you'd be like, I'm going to go first if everyone's okay with that. I'm not going to wait an hour and a half to freeze out here and then tell jokes to these people who might be dead by then. Right.
I talked to Tom Cotter a couple months ago. I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Cotter, but
so funny, yeah.
Yeah, he was telling me about a gig he did at a golf course. It was during the summer, and it was later in the afternoon. And he was on last, and they were literally on a green. And so, I know, right? And so he said by the time they got to him, it was getting dark. So they just pulled up some golf carts that had lights on them and turned the lights on him so people could see him. Easy solution. Well, apparently he said that attracted every insect in a 5-mile radius.
My God.
And he was being attacked by all sorts of like moths, mosquitoes. He was like constantly swatting in the air. They were getting in his mouth and nose. And so I don't know if you had anything like that, but I guess the cold could.
I sure did. Yeah. I did one in like a little marshy area in New Hampshire over the summer, and they put the string lights, and I'm a sucker for string lights.
Yeah.
They're going to be the death of me. I will walk into any space that has string lights. Like, if it's a back alley full of rabid coyotes, I'm like, oh my God, they have fairy lights. Dead immediately. So I was like, I'll do this perfect. And they handed us like mosquito bands and hosed us down with DEET like as soon as we got there. And I was like, should I leave? Like, in my mind, I was like, I don't know about this. And then I was like, well, it's still COVID, and shows are slim pickings right now, so if I'm going to die of malaria, it's happening.
What were you performing in, like a lean-to or something? Or
I don't know. It was just, we had a stage, like a wooden stage, but it was in like the swampiest, marshiest area, and we just like, as soon as you said hi, the booker just like hosed me down head to toe with DEET, and I was like, this is going to be rough.
Right. Well,
and the audience was getting bit, but it's one of those times when like everyone pretends they're not incredibly uncomfortable.
Right. Yes.
Like when you're at a wedding where people are like, these two people should not be getting married, but we RSVP'd before we found out he cheated on her. So I guess we're doing this?
Oh, right, exactly. It's like, okay, they just doused me in DEET and they gave me a gun.
Yeah, we're all just going to pretend we're fine. We're having fun.
Everything's good. That's great. Well, this Saturday night, Samuel Slaters, they're calling it the Three More Funny Ladies. And have you ever been part of an all-woman comedy show?
I have. It's fun because often you see on comedy shows, it's rare that you see more than one woman on a lineup. So it's nice. Aaron Jackson once said they started an all-woman open mic in New York, and a guy comic had said like, oh, that's ridiculous you have that. And Aaron Jackson, very, very funny New York comedian, said, well, we like to see each other every once in a while. You never book more than one of us at a time. So it's lovely to get to work with other funny ladies. I'm thrilled.
Well, it looks like a good bill. It's you and Carrie Louise and Maya Mannion, and it's Saturday night, Samuel Slaters.
Great bill.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great show. And it's inside. No DEET necessary, and you don't have to bring a gun.
Right. No DEET, no gun, and you don't have to wear a survival snowsuit. That'll be
exactly.
Actually, And Samuel Slaters has good food and stuff, so people should make a night of it and get dinner, see a comedy show. One more thing I want to ask you. It's kind of a personal thing I read about you, which I think is really sweet. That do you still bring something of your mom's on stage with you when you do stand up?
Yeah, I try to wear a piece of my mom's jewelry. I always have the prayer card from her wake in my purse with me, and if I'm lucky enough to be wearing clothing with pockets, which is never guaranteed for women, I'll put the prayer card in my pocket. But I love to bring something of hers with me.
That's great. And did she never get to see you do stand-up?
She did, but not when I was good yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, she was at that first gig, right? And
yeah, she was at those first couple gigs because they were up here in Mass, and I was down in D.C. So they only got to see me a few times when I would intentionally book a show for when they were down there.
Oh, okay.
And my dad would always, before every show, he would be like, listen, no pressure, but don't say anything inappropriate and humiliate us. And if you are going to do that, just don't tell anyone we're your parents. And so I was like, okay. Looking forward to it, Dad. Thank you.
No pressure.
Yeah.
At all.
So she didn't get to see me at my best. So I kind of like the idea that maybe she can now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's awesome. So that's this Saturday, Samuel Slaters down in Webster, part of Indian Ranch. You can see Emily Ruskowski there with Carrie Louise and Maya Mannion. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I'm sure you're in between cases right now in social work trying to farm some more material. So I appreciate you taking the time.
I got the notebook and the highlighter ready.
Nice. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Everyone come out to the show. It's going to be a great time.